We are, by the way, we're videotaping this to make a CD. So I'm going to tell the speakers to where to stand, and please stay there. Otherwise, your pictures will be cut off automatically from the CD, which you will get a free copy next year. So I'm supposed to stand here. Once again, I'm the director of the Pilot Research Program, sponsored by NIOSH at the University of Cincinnati. And this is the 5th annual symposium. And I'd like to introduce two other key people associated with it. The ERC director under which the pilot program is situated is Dr. Scott Clark, and the deputy director of the ERC is Dr. Carol Rice. So with that, I would like to now make some announcements and then go ahead with our guest speaker, a keynote speaker. There are a few items as for announcements are for the awardees from this year. It is very important all of you fill out in your packet the survey information you received and return it before you leave tomorrow. And leave your PowerPoint CD, if you have with you, with the front desk. And if you have not received your award grant information, it's very critical that you must send our ERC office the approved IRB letter to her immediately or as soon as you have, because without that, a actual release of funds cannot be made by NIOSH. We have no control. So you must have an approved IRB letter sent to our office here in this building. So if you have more questions, the contact person in this department for your grant is Ms. Noreen Johnson, and her number is 558-3936, area code 513. The couple of general and it's echoing. Maybe it's echoing from there. Those of you who are here to also get their CEU, continuing education points, it's very critical you sign in every day. Without your signature, you cannot be given the points for your CEU. In terms of a couple of other general announcements, please fill out the evaluation of the symposium form, which is in your packet, and leave it in the front desk before you leave the conference tomorrow. The restrooms are right outside the hall, the auditorium right behind you, the two of them over there, and a couple of them on the side hallway, and the one on the hallway parallel from that entrance to all the way to the end. We have poster sessions as you've seen in your schedule. There will be a break time for go and observe the posters. They're all situated in the hallway in this floor on the left. And once again, I just wanted to remind all the speakers here today, the speakers must stay. There's a little square drawn here in this area so that your pictures are properly observed in our camera and then put on a CD. If you go too close to the screen, you get all blacked out and nothing can be visible. Look like a Halloween picture. So, well, with that, I'd like to now introduce our keynote speaker for today. I'm sure many of you have noticed we had a last-minute change. Mr. John Henshaw, who's the director of OSHA and Assistant Secretary of Labor for OSHA, was originally planned to be here, but he got called away by Secretary of Labor Elaine Chao, so he couldn't come, but he made a wise decision to send someone whom we know, at least from last year, is Nancy Adams, who's the executive assistant to the Assistant Secretary of Labor of OSHA. She's graciously stepped in to fill in for us, and we appreciate that. And she has a wide range of expertise in the area of OSHA. She's been with OSHA for the last almost 30 years, and she was chief of OSHA Voluntary Protection Program in New York. and New York Area Director and Deputy Regional Administrator for New York and Deputy Director of Safety Standards Program. She has worked directly with OSHA's last 7 Assistant Secretary of Labor, so in some sense she knows a lot more about this thing than anybody else. So I'm very happy Nancy was able to come, and more importantly, she was here last year, accompanying our last year's keynote, Dr. Howard, so she has some familiarity with what we do. Well, without further ado, I'd like to invite Nancy Adams to give her keynote and welcome her to this symposium.
This square, huh?
Well, these cameras are right here. They cannot go too far.
From my perspective, I'd want to stay out of this box. having my remarks, forever emblazoned on a CD is not something I don't think I was quite prepared for. But anyway, well, first of all, it's nice to be here. John Henshaw certainly is disappointed that he can't be here, but duty called in Washington, and so I have the honor of stepping in for him. And I'm delighted to be here in Cincinnati with you all for your 5th symposium. You're starting to develop a real history here for this, and that's great, especially since occupational safety and health is such a vital and important field to all of us and to all the America's workers. And I'm glad that you all have chosen this field to do so much important research in. And I know everybody here is probably eager to hear what everybody else is up to. Before coming, I actually had the opportunity to look through the list of your poster sessions and your presentations, and the variety and depth of the investigations that you are all involved in is quite impressive. Your hard work will no doubt shed light on a lot of issues that we currently face, as well as those that we don't quite know that we will be facing in the future, and perhaps pave the way for new innovations or for additional research. Our job at OSHA, along with the rest of the safety and health professionals, is really to always find ways to put your findings into practice. And I know NIOSH, under John Howard's tenure, has coined the phrase R2P, research to practice. Our objective at OSHA is very simple. We want to reduce what John Henshaw has termed the triple bottom line. That's injuries, illnesses, and deaths on the job, loss of life or fatalities. And he's given us a very simple goal, and that's to achieve 0. Simple, but exceedingly difficult for all of us to do. But as safety and health professionals, I think you would agree that no other number is acceptable. Therefore, results are really important, and your research hopefully will help to lead to the results that will allow us to get to that simple number. Somebody once said that nobody really is interested in the storms that you encounter if you're trying to bring in a ship. They just want to make sure that the ship makes the port. And here in OSHA, I think we're not going to be successful until we reach the lowest that we can in terms of injuries and illnesses and fatalities. So we can't say that we've brought the ship in, but hopefully with all of your help and the rest of the help of the safety and health professionals across the nation and around the world, that someday that we'll achieve that goal. We are making solid progress. Just last month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, who we rely on for injury and illness data, released the fatality data for 2003. We also suffer from having significant lapse time between real-time data and the data that's available to track our course. But they released the data for 2003, and while the actual number of fatalities in 2003 rose slightly, it rose 25, the rate per 100,000 workers remained the same. So overall, we're holding the line on the loss of life, but we need to do better, and we can. Injuries and illnesses right now have been declining over the last several years, and in some cases dramatically in specific areas, even in spite of the increase in employment here in the U.S. But this afternoon I really want to talk to you briefly about how OSHA has approached this attack on the triple bottom line. And to talk to you also a little bit about what we see that might be on the horizon. We start at OSHA under John Henshaw's leadership with a balanced approach to occupational safety and health. And that balanced approach includes three components: fair, strong, and effective enforcement, outreach, education, and compliance assistance, and the development of partnerships and cooperative programs. Now, OSHA's underpinning always will be its enforcement program. And that includes several elements these days designed to focus on workplaces that really need our attention. With our limited resources, we will never get to inspect all of the workplaces in America. So we need to do specific targeting to those industries that are experiencing the highest levels of injuries and illnesses. So we have what we call a site-specific targeting program. It involves a universe of 80,000 employers nationwide who report their injuries and illnesses to us each year. From that list, we identify about 14,000 of the highest rate industries, and they're site-specific. So we know exactly what plant on what street in what city of the U.S. that reports to us as part of that universe has the highest injury and illness rates. 14,000 of those companies receive a specific letter addressed to the CEO or to the head of the plant from John Henshaw, the Assistant Secretary for OSHA, that says, you need to improve. Several more of those sites, somewhere in the area of about 1,000 or a little over, in addition to receiving that letter, actually get an on-site visit from OSHA. They get inspected. Well, we've got a recent study, because we're always looking to find ways to see whether or not the approaches that we're taking in OSHA are effective. And we've got a new study saying that this site-specific targeting program is working. The new study shows that all of the work sites that receive a letter that says to them that their injuries and illnesses are the highest will see a 5% decline in their injury and illness rates over the next 3 years after having received that letter. More importantly, we can see a 12 to 13% decline in those sites where not only do they get the letter, but they also get an on-site inspection. So that leads us to say we've found something that works. And our whole focus is to make sure that we change behavior, that we change the organizational cultures at those work sites so that while we're there, we're just not there making an inspection and then we leave and things go back to the way they were before we arrived, but that there's an actual difference that occurs as a result of our visit at that site. In addition to the site-specific targeting program, we've got 5 national emphasis programs right now that focus specifically on safety and health issues. Those are amputations, lead, silica, shipbreaking, and trenching. Those are programs that we will emphasize in all of the area offices all across the country. We identify those industries where there's concerns, also on other issues that we think are going to be important in the future, as we intend to emphasize occupational asthma over the next several years. We have a whole group that's working on a whole approach to dealing with health outcomes. Over the years that OSHA's been in existence, we've found it much easier to deal with targeting and seeing effects in the safety side of the house, but it's much more difficult because of latency periods and levels of exposure and the ability or the lack of ability to track those things, a decrease in specific areas that have health outcomes. Well, in addition to the 5 national emphasis programs, our 10 regional offices have 67 offices, of which you all have one here in Cincinnati, and the director here with us today. They identify local issues that are of significance to them wherever they are geographically located. And through local emphasis programs, we really effectively deal with probably 140 more specific areas that we increase in occupational injuries, illnesses, and fatalities. Some of them include falls in construction, which we know is a significant source of injury, illness, and death. Auto body shops, fish processing plants for parts of our offices that are along the coast, nursing homes, oil and gas servicing, and also dry cleaners. More than half of our inspections are directly related to our targeting programs, but the other half really come from things that we can't control, and that is complaints from employees, from referrals from other federal and state agencies that identify issues that they think that we could help address, and also from fatal accidents that occur because we're required to investigate every occupational fatality. So that gives you a quick kind of overview of where we're headed in terms of our enforcement program. The second strategy that we think is effective in helping us meet this goal of zero involves outreach, education, and compliance assistance. And we want to provide practical information to employers and to employees so they understand what it is they need to do. And towards that goal, we have really worked hard to expand our resources that are available to them on the web. We've now got more than 45 electronic tools, or we call them e-tools, on our website that can be downloaded for small businesses to use to meet OSHA standards or to look at options in terms of what they need for their specific work sites that would best allow them to comply. We have a 2-page electronic newsletter that comes out by subscription twice a month, and that's now up to 53,000 subscribers. Are not a subscriber and you wish to become one, because it gives you every 2 weeks the latest and greatest on what's happening within OSHA, you can just log on to our website, www.osha.gov, and there's an opportunity for you to sign up and immediately be put onto the subscription service to receive that newsletter called Quick Takes. We've increased the use of a toll-free hotline, 1-800-321-OSHA, and we now get more than 160,000 calls a year from individuals that are looking for information about how to deal with hazards in their workplaces. Last year we had more than 310,000 individuals receive safety and health related training from both our outreach trainers in our area offices, from our Susan Harwood grants, from our OSHA Educational Resource Centers, and also from our Training Institute in Chicago. We've also dedicated a lot of our focus over the last several years to dealing with reaching hard-to-reach workers, immigrants, non-English speaking workers. And this past year, we actually focused quite significantly on reaching Hispanic workers. We held the first ever Hispanic Safety and Health Summit in July in Florida. We had a packed house of over 500 workers and employers and other people that were interested in the issue of reaching Spanish workers and helping them deal with safety and health issues on the job. We formed a task force in 2002 to help develop partnerships and to identify effective strategies that would work to reach employers and workers who have limited English-speaking skills. We've established a Spanish web page on our website, and we've translated numerous of our publications into Spanish for workers to have access to the information in a language that they better have the opportunity to understand. We also now have a Spanish compliance assistance page, which has a glossary of safety and health terms, which we've learned over the years that literal translations may not be the best thing in terms of trying to get the appropriate message across. when it comes to specific technical areas, whether it's in Spanish or any other language. So we've developed a glossary that we know works in terms of translation for safety and health, and it's available both in English and Spanish. And we've had our staff all across the country participate in a lot of local activities and events, fairs and training programs and safety days, where we've actually had the ability to focus on Spanish-speaking workers and interact not only with the workers but their families, which we think is real important, because I think if we can get to the families help the parents, if both parents are working, understand how important it is to them that they come home healthy and whole at the end of the day. So that's kind of a recap of our outreach and education strategy. And the third strategy that we're really looking at, and that has grown significantly under Assistant Secretary Henshaw's leadership, is and cooperative programs. And the use of these we have expanded tremendously. Our premier partnership program, the Voluntary Protection Program, that identifies those companies that are on the cutting edge of having in place safety and health programs, has grown to more than 1,180 sites nationwide, a 2/3 increase since 2000, a significant jump in our Voluntary Protection Program work sites. And we've also launched 3 new programs under VPP, our corporate program, our challenge program, and now a new construction program, all 3 designed to help and build that cooperative program such that we can see more work sites that have tremendous safety and health rates, lower, in most cases, greater than 50% compared to other industries in their own same industrial sector. We also have a SHARP program that recognizes sites that have achieved excellence in safety and health through our free OSHA consultation service. The consultation service has doubled the number of SHARP sites nationwide. SHARP sites now are up to 789. And we have 238 strategic partnerships that we have formed, primarily with trade associations, unions, that emphasize strong safety and health management. In 2002, we added one more program in this cooperative arena, and that is we developed a program called an alliance. And alliances, OSHA joins with trade associations, unions, employers, professional societies, universities, worker among the membership of those organizations. And today, we actually have 240 alliances in place all across the country, trying again to deal with effectively lowering the number of injuries, illnesses, and fatalities on the job. Expanding our net, bringing in all of the tools and the resources that we can to leverage the effect on that triple bottom line. I think the goal of all of these various tools is working. I think they're making a difference. We have a long way to go, and with the help of everyone involved, we'll make incremental but nonetheless important advances in reducing injuries and illnesses. So let me talk a little bit in 2000 and beyond. In 2003, we developed a 5-year strategic plan as an agency. And that plan was designed to chart our course to actually affect that triple bottom line. It identified the significant goals that we were going to attempt to achieve to reduce injury rates through the year 2008. Now, within that plan, every year we develop an operational plan. And that operational plan allows us to make adjustments within the framework of the strategic plan based on data and on analysis of how effective we have been in achieving the goals that we have set for ourselves and the targets that we've set within that 5-year strategic plan. We're putting the final touches on our new operating plan. In fact, yesterday we had our OSHA Executive Board meeting, which encompasses all of the heads of all of our directorates, the Assistant Secretary and the Deputy Assistant Secretary, as well as all of our regional administrators, which represent the enforcement side across the nation. Had them all together talking about finalizing what was going to be in the operating plan for 2005. We're going to focus on 7 industries, which are the same 7 industries in 2005 that we focused on in 2004. We felt 1 year's worth of experience, we didn't have the data to say whether or not we were effective and that we had made any impact in those 7 industries yet. Those 7 industries are landscaping services, oil and gas fields and services, canned, frozen, and preserved fruits, vegetables, and specialty foods, concrete and concrete products, blast furnaces and basic steel products, ship and boat building and repair, and public warehousing and storage. We're also going to emphasize some other areas of concern that are associated with hazards: amputations, ergonomics, lead, silica, young workers, youth, immigrant and for both employers and employees, small business, because it's growing like crazy in the U.S., workplace violence, and transportation, including a brand new initiative on seatbelt use within the federal government that we launched at the National Safety Council in New Orleans last month. These industries and issues are where we believe we can achieve the greatest payoff in reducing injuries, illnesses, and fatalities. As researchers, you're all looking not only to clearly identify problems, but you're also looking at emerging issues. We look ahead too, and there's several areas of concern that we have that we're going to look to you and to our sister agency to help us. The first one of those, I think, we talked about last year, and that's nanotechnologies. Our friends at NIOSH have really drawn attention to this, and as you know, we're talking about research and development at an atomic and molecular and macromolecular level. Man-made nanomaterials that have chemical and electrical and magnetic properties and behaviors that are different from the larger sized particles that are the same or similar composition. They have unique properties that make them nanomaterials, and they have exciting new options for the workplace and for the marketplace, creating longer lasting materials. We have a lot of folks that I know that work for us that are thrilled because they allow for longer lasting tennis balls, more effective coatings to make glass easier to clean, to make clothing and furniture less stain-free. Just to give you a few examples, the big Trinitron at Times Square. But unfortunately, as typically happens as technology advances, we find studies that show while these particular things may be smaller, they appear in some instances to be much more toxic than their larger identical chemical compositions. And they can penetrate the skin and even cross the blood-brain barrier, which are issues that we're going to have to deal with in terms of developing those in greater numbers in the workplace. To help address this issue, OSHA is participating in the Nanotechnology Environmental Health Implications Subcommittee, which is part of a subgroup of the National Science and Technology Council. We're working with other federal agencies and a risk assessment task force to develop a framework under which all of the federal agencies that have an impact in this area can evaluate the adequacy of the existing regulations and identify where health effects and research is most needed. We're also working with NIOSH to develop best practices guides. The nanomaterials are already covered by some of our standards, but we're not quite sure how they'll apply. I mean, you can consider the laboratory standard, our respiratory protection standard, our personal protective equipment standard, to some degree our PELs, hazard communication. But we've got new issues to face. I mean, what are we going to say in terms of hazard information that should be included on an MSDS for a nanoparticle? And how should manufacturers take these materials and evaluate the hazards that they may pose? We've got issues to consider because the industry right now is growing rapidly, although there are right now only about 300 companies worldwide, actually, that are producing nanomaterials. The expected growth by 2005 is 900 million, with projections of $11 billion by 2010. So over the next decade, we expect to have about 2 million workers who will be exposed to these materials, and it's incumbent upon all of us to look to the future to see what we can do to protect them and to make sure that we're addressing the issues that we're going to face as we address these new technologies. The other topic that I want to talk on just for a moment is perhaps not so much an issue as it is an opportunity, and that's control banding. Workshop here on control banding this past March, and perhaps some of you attended. I think it was very well attended. We think it's an exciting concept. Control banding offers a simplified strategy for employers to address hazards in their workplace. It helps employers calculate risks based on specific chemicals and quantities of hazardous materials they use, rather than using exposure monitoring as a trigger. They would use a simple formula where employers can then determine the level of protection they need to provide to minimize the exposure to workers and therefore the risk of injury and illness. In the United Kingdom, the Safety and Health Executive has led the way on the control banding efforts. After learning that in their country, the small employers were having a tremendous amount of difficulty dealing with chemicals because they didn't think the chemicals that they were working with were necessarily hazardous. And they typically used a practice called custom and practice rather than doing risk assessments in terms of determining levels of exposure and the danger of properties of chemicals. So the UK Health and Safety Executive concluded that by simply establishing an occupational exposure limits and expecting employers to comply solely with those wasn't an effective approach, and that control banding may offer a new approach that allows simplifying hazard determinations and to provide clear, more simple guidance to small employers on effective strategies for controlling worker exposures. OSHA is actually considering a variation on this approach for the new abrasive blasting piece of our silica standard. Employers might be required to simply provide the appropriate respiratory protection in abrasive blasting, full abrasive blasting respirators, rather than doing monitoring to confirm the high levels that we already know exist in those types of operation. It's an option that provides the need for monitoring, avoids the need for monitoring, and makes compliance for smaller employers especially a lot easier. And we think that, at least at this point in time, it's a strategy that warrants further investigation, perhaps by some of you in the audience, and also very thoughtful consideration. But we clearly know that OSHA hasn't been successful in a regulatory approach that takes a substance-by-substance approach to trying to control exposures to hazardous chemicals. And therefore, this is a new option that we might look at in the future to address protecting workers in the work environment. The last topic that I want to touch on that concerns all of us as safety and health professionals that we really need to consider as we approach the 21st century is Homeland Security. We're all used to looking at the risks that we can control to some degree within our own workplaces. But these days, that's not the only risk that we have to be concerned with. We need to be prepared to address chemical and biological risks from terrorists. And we at OSHA are taking steps to do that. We're working with the Department of Homeland Security on the new National Response Plan. The cabinet officers are expected to get together in the near term to sign off on a complete new National Response Plan that will go into effect across the nation, which will cover all disasters, not just terrorist responses, but natural disasters like earthquakes and hurricanes. We've worked specifically with the Department of Homeland Security on developing a worker health and safety support annex that's a piece of that National Response Plan. And we've helped the Department of Homeland Security define the role of a safety officer in the Incident Command System, which is the system that the National Response Plan will use in responding to any type of national emergency. We, OSHA, will be part of the National Integration Center that will oversee the system when, in fact, there is an emergency. In concert with our activities with the Department of Homeland Security, we have been working on training for disaster site workers. Our experiences at the World Trade and at the Pentagon after 9/11 clearly reflects that we have a need to make sure that the workers that go into disaster sites have the appropriate training and education to deal with the hazards that they're going to face while they're there. We're also finalizing a first receivers document geared to the hospital emergency personnel, who are clearly going to be the frontline people that are going to be faced with treating victims of chemical and biological threats or releases. We in OSHA have created specialized response teams now that have somewhere between 7 and 11 experts that we can mobilize rapidly, and they'll help workers and employers deal with emergency situations such as toxic chemical releases or biological agents, ionizing radiation, or in fact if we have a situation where we have all of those together along with a structural collapse. Those emergency teams have been established. The folks that are on those teams know who they are. We've got go kits set up so that should something happen, we can mobilize them immediately to go to wherever they're needed. I guess I'd like to close today by saying that we're living in some challenging times. I started with the agency back, it's hard to believe because I was just only a child, 30 years ago. That we'd be dealing with workplace violence. I didn't think we'd be dealing with tuberculosis again. Back then, I really didn't understand much about the need and the impact that musculoskeletal disorders and ergonomics was going to play in the workplace. And so this balanced approach that we're trying to take with addressing these various different hazards and situations that we're facing in the workplace today, we're hoping that these strategies work. We're excited about them. We think that we're going to be successful in having some additional chipping away at that bottom line and reducing injuries, illnesses, and fatalities. We hope also that they're going to make us more effective in dealing with safety and health issues that are on the horizon that we today aren't quite sure what those are going to be. We're also really encouraged by the work that you all do and that you have been doing to study and to come up with solutions to help us as safety and health professionals make changes to protect our workers. As a result of all of your work, it'll lead to safer, healthier work environments for the future. That means more workers are going to go home safe and sound to their families. It's good news for all of us. It's good news for the workers, it's good news for the employers, and it's good news for the nation. And to just leave you with the understanding that you all make a difference every day. The work that you're doing affects the real lives of people every day, day in and day out. And that we count on you to help us in that regard. OSHA can't do it alone. NIOSH can't do it alone. We need the help of all of you. And to that extent, we count on you help us push the envelope, to help us find new ways to make sure that we are doing what Congress intended when they created us, and that was to assure workers go home safe, healthy, and whole at night. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Just a second. Can you leave that on? Anybody have a question? Okay. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Nancy Adams, please. Just stand here. Yeah. I appreciate your willingness to come over such a short notice and with such a short notice invitation, giving us a very nice and dedicated presentation for our young investigators and junior investigators and everybody else. And as a token of appreciation, we have a little souvenir from Cincinnati.
Heavy. Well, I must say, you all have made me feel like family. These were pretty big shoes to step into, but I appreciate. Oh, look at this! This is wonderful. Thank you so much. It's engraved with Nancy Adams, University of Cincinnati, PRP Symposium, October 2004. Thank you. This will have a place of honor on my desk.
Thank you very much for coming over.
you.
Appreciate it.